More flexi-wing drama as multiple teams have been caught out, Mercedes explains their upgrade issues, and Liam is looking good to replace Sergio. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get straight into the latest F1 news. The FIA has confirmed that several F1 teams have had to modify their rear wings for the United States Grand Prix. Following additional scrutiny on the rear wings being used by the F1 teams, McLaren is not the only team that has had to modify its design. At the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, the possibility of excessively flexing rear wings became a prevalent topic, as McLaren's Oscar Piastri won using a flexible rear wing that increased the slot gap for enhanced straight-line speed, which quickly became dubbed a mini DRS. Rival teams raised concerns with the FIA about McLaren's design, with discussions thus ensuing between the governing body and the Woking-based squad. McLaren's wing had passed all required static load tests, but ultimately, the FIA deemed the wing's behavior unacceptable, and McLaren proactively agreed to adjust its low drag specification. The FIA has since issued clearer guidelines for all teams regarding acceptable rear wing designs, as other teams were also found to be experimenting with slot gap openings. Nicholas Tombazis, head of single-seater matters at the FIA, has revealed that several teams had to make adjustments for Austin, with McLaren being the only one to confirm changes, albeit with denial that this was as a result of a direct request from the governing body. McLaren proactively offered to make some minor adjustments to our rear wing following the Azerbaijan GP, a McLaren spokesperson told PlanetF1.com. We have made minor adjustments to all our rear wings since Baku to varying extents to ensure no further issues in this area. Tombazis, speaking to Motorsport.com in Austin, said, "We issued after Singapore some communication about rear wings, saying what we would consider acceptable or not acceptable, and 2 or 3 teams had to make some small tweaks to adjust to that. It's unconfirmed which other teams have had to make modifications." Tombazis noted that the new guidance specifies that any increase in slot gap exceeding 2 mm when DRS is closed would be deemed illegal. "We don't want the amount of opening there to exceed 2 mm, he said. "There's some natural opening because of the way the wings are mounted and deform and so on, but some teams were deforming more. To better monitor compliance, the FIA will implement reference dots on rear wings, allowing for a more accurate assessment of deformation via rear-facing onboard cameras." Tombazis added, "We just want to make sure that there isn't any sort of continuing trend in a certain direction, but it's not because we have any immediate plans to introduce a new test or anything." Although McLaren's mini DRS wing complied with regulations, the FIA expressed dissatisfaction with the design. When asked if McLaren would have faced a report for a rules violation had they continued using the wing, Tombazis confirmed the Woking-based squad had received a direct communique regarding the issue. "Yes, we would have, because we specifically gave a warning to them. We said, look, we consider that as something you need to change. If they had ignored us, and they generally don't, then we would have reported them." Toto Wolff called out the inconsistent stewards' decisions at the United States GP and wants to know if there are correlations in what he feels was biased decision-making. The Austin stewards came in for some stick during Sunday's Grand Prix, with Wolff saying George Russell's penalty was a joke, while McLaren were fuming over Lando Norris. Russell was the first driver penalized on Sunday, hit with a 5-second penalty for forcing Valtteri Bottas off the track at turn 12 as he set about recovering from his pit lane start. Yuki Tsunoda received a similar penalty, and yet Max Verstappen twice escaped without sanctions for forcing Norris off the track as the championship rival went wheel to wheel. In fact, their battle ended with Norris being penalized for his antics in their second bout as he overtook Verstappen off the track, even though Verstappen had defended by pushing them both off. Russell, who finished the Grand Prix in an impressive 6th place from the pit lane, asked Mercedes on his cooldown lap whether Verstappen had received a penalty for his earlier Turn 1 battle with Norris. Wolff replied, "No, he didn't get a penalty, and at the end, Lando got a penalty for being forced off an overtaking on the outside. I guess it is a bit biased decision-making." Wolff called out stewards, telling Sky F1 their decision-making in Austin was inconsistent. With Valtteri, it wasn't even a race. In the sprint, we saw a few of those incidents that were exactly the same and weren't penalized when racing for positions. Real positions, actually. Receiving that penalty is just completely odd and bizarre. I think we know why, but I can't say that on television. Sometimes there are correlations, he added. When there is decision-making, that is a bit interesting. Wolff reiterated his points when he sat down for his post-race briefing with the media. I think the stewards are in a really difficult situation. There's always going to be one that's happy and the other one unhappy, he started by saying. But, he continued, we need to try to understand whether there are certain patterns in stewarding decisions and whether that correlates to some of the, situations. Everybody's racing hard, but for me, the decision against George was inexplicable. We've seen plenty of these situations in turn 12. Not one of them was penalized until it hit George, and then obviously there was another one of those. I don't want to comment on the Max Lando situation because it's not my race. Zach and Andrea, McLaren bosses, will look at that. Everybody's giving their best. I need to hold myself back. Wolff, though, was quick to insist that not all stewards should be tarnished with the same brush before calling on FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem to get involved in rooting out the inconsistent ones. I think there's great stewards, honestly great stewards, that have either been in the racing car or have a non-biased view on situations, doing the best of their abilities for a job that is truly difficult, he said. We mustn't put everybody in the same category. There's a few, inconsistencies, but I'm sure the president is going to look at. Zach Brown has called for Red Bull's management, as well as mechanics past and present, to sign an affidavit stating Red Bull never used the car's bib trick under parc fermé conditions. The McLaren chief wants a penalty that would be a deterrent, such as an exclusion, should it come to light that Red Bull did break parc fermé rules. Arriving in Austin, a report claimed one unnamed team has a hidden trick that allowed them to adjust the height of the bib, or T-tray, and that it could be used in parc fermé between qualifying and the races. Red Bull admitted the RB20 was fitted with such a device, but insisted it was inaccessible once the car is fully assembled. They even gave the FIA a demonstration to show this. Red Bull team boss Christian Horner blamed paranoia and moaning from one of our rivals for making a big deal out of what he felt was a non-story. I feel that it's sometimes to distract from perhaps what's going on in your own house. Sometimes you try and light a fire somewhere else, he added. However, Red Bull's rivals aren't willing to let it go. I'd like to see the senior leadership, the former chief mechanics and the current mechanics sign an affidavit stating that they have never used or have no knowledge of it being used, the McLaren CEO told the Daily Mail. The suggestion in the pit lane from a handful of people is that it has been used in that manner, so the only way to bottom it out is the old-fashioned sign here, stating what has gone on. I know if I was presented with an affidavit and the consequences of not telling the truth were severe, I'd tell the truth. I am confident the matter is dealt with going forward, but if they have done it in the past, there is no gray area about it. Modifying your car in parc fermé is as clear a breach of the regulations as possible. Zach Brown suggests exclusion as deterrent. The report claims Brown will meet with FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem to discuss the matter as he's not sold on Red Bull's inaccessible reasoning. Look at the wording of their denial about the device being inaccessible when the car is prepared to go racing, he added. Well, the car isn't fully prepared to go racing in parc fermé. Many things can be changed. You can pull the seat out, you can adjust the pedals. Should it ever come to light that Red Bull had broken parc fermé regulations, the American believes something like exclusion would be a fitting penalty. It needs to be a deterrent, he said. We have seen drivers excluded from races and championships. And I am not saying Max should be excluded, by the way. We have seen teams excluded from races and championships. If, and I say if, parc fermé rules have been broken, the penalty needs to be of that magnitude, depending on whether they did it once or have been doing it regularly for 3 years. There must be consequences. Red Bull outscored McLaren for the first time since Spain at the United States Grand Prix. The Woking team's lead in the Constructors' Championship down to 40 points. Max Verstappen has no sympathy for McLaren's point of view over his late race clash with Lando Norris in Austin. After all, they complain about a lot lately. McLaren were unhappy with Verstappen's defending at the United States Grand Prix, as he twice forced Norris off the track when the Briton attacked him for position. The first incident was at turn 1 on the opening lap, when Verstappen dived up the inside and forced the McLaren off the track. Charles Leclerc pounced to take the lead. He clearly pushed me off, Norris complained over the radio. He had no intention to make the corner. He himself went off the track. Norris and Verstappen were back at it again late in the race as they raced for third place, having also lost out to the second Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. Norris attempted to pass Verstappen around the outside of turn 12 only for the Dutchman to brake late with both drivers out of the track. The McLaren driver kept his foot down in the runoff area and rejoined the race ahead of Verstappen. "He needs to give it back," Verstappen said, but Norris felt it was clear he was also off the track. The Briton received a 5-second penalty for leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage, and, taking the checkered flag 4.1s ahead of Verstappen, their positions were reserved. Norris complained that Verstappen defends by going off track, he overtakes by going off track, adamant that if he goes off the track, clearly he's gone in way too hard and also gained an advantage by doing what he did. McLaren team boss Andrea Stella was more vehement in his criticism, blasting the stewards as their interference in a beautiful piece of motorsport was inappropriate because both cars went off track, so both cars gained an advantage. Verstappen, who increased his advantage in the drivers' standings for the first time in 5 races, had no sympathy for McLaren's argument. "No, I don't," he told the media during the post-race press conference. "I mean, they complain about a lot lately anyway." Verstappen's comment refers to McLaren chief Zak Brown being one of the more vocal people in the paddock, questioning Red Bull's bib trick. That McLaren told Norris not to give the position back raised some eyebrows, as the Briton could have potentially attacked Verstappen in the final few laps had he done so. Instead, he fell from 3rd to 4th by 0.9s. "It's very clear in the rules," Verstappen said. "Outside the white line, you cannot pass. I've been done for it as well in the past. I think it's quite clear. You can't overtake outside of the white line. I mean, I got done for it also here in I think 2017 or whatever it was, so I lost my podium like that. So I just remained calm, tried to do the best I could after that to bring the car to the end, because it was not easy with the tires and the situation that I was in. But yeah, overall I still really enjoyed that battle that we had." Norris was one of several drivers penalized for turn 12 incidents with Verstappen, asked if the FIA should come up with a solution going forward, such as a gravel trap. "I mean, it might help, but we have to deal with bikes as well that race here," said Verstappen. "They don't like the gravel, so then you have to remove it again. Track days, people spinning off, of course, on track days. You have amateur drivers, professional drivers. It does cost a lot of money when you have to do that, and not every track can do that throughout the year. Yes, it would work, but on the other hand, I'm not sure how sustainable that is for the season." Winning Saturday's sprint before adding a further 15 points in the Grand Prix, Verstappen extended his advantage over Norris by 5 points to 57. "That is definitely the positive," he said as he chases his 4th successive world title. "I did hope for a little bit more performance today, so that's what we have to analyze. Why today we were just not that good. I think everyone was a little bit better, or at least the same as yesterday, and it felt like we were definitely worse. So I need to understand why that was, because I don't know at the moment." Toto Wolff is 100% not blaming Lewis Hamilton for spinning out of the United States Grand Prix, the team boss saying it's clear the issue was the car. Lining up 17th on the grid after a shock Q1 elimination in qualifying, Hamilton made an incredible start to run P12 on lap 2. That, though, is where it ended for him. Heading into turn 19, the 7-time world champion lost control of the rear of the W15 and spun off the track and into the gravel trap where his Mercedes was beached. Hamilton was baffled by his off. "I had a great start, was feeling good and got up to 12th, he said when asked by PlanetF1.com about his race retirement. "I wasn't even pushing at that point. I was literally just trying to get going and bringing the tires up to temperature. The car started bouncing, the left front started bouncing, and the rear end just came around the same as George in qualifying." Suffering a near-identical incident to his teammate, Hamilton questioned if it was an issue with the car, especially as Russell wasn't having similar issues in the Grand Prix, having reverted to an older spec. "In P1 I had the same thing," he said. "I had the spin in turn 3, which is so rare. I have never spun in turn 3 in all the years I've been here. I was just saying about George obviously having the same problem yesterday. He has gone back to the old spec car and is looking good out there, so maybe there is something with the new upgrade." Mercedes Motorsport boss Wolff confirmed Hamilton's theory, adamant he was not just saying that to protect the driver. "Where I sit at the moment, it's 100% not Lewis's fault, and that's not to say that I'm protecting him," he said in his post-race media briefing. It's clear it was gusty, there was a slipstream. How does all of that interact? Wolff reiterated this to Sky Sports when asked what had gone wrong to lead to Hamilton spinning out of the race. 100% car, he stated. He was not even pushing at that stage. We saw it with George on Saturday. Perhaps that was maybe over-pushing it, but still abrupt losing it and putting it in the wall. Today there was wind and a bit of dirty air from the car in front. We definitely have an issue. I don't know if yesterday was the same. Lewis Hamilton doesn't lose the car on lap 2 like this. Wolff, though, is confident it's not a fundamental issue with Mercedes' Austin upgrade, saying they will continue with the new package at the next race in Mexico. I don't think we have a fundamental issue with the upgrades very much, he explained to the media. I think it's more interaction, more aero and mechanical stuff. And therefore, we're going to continue with the upgrade. Makes no sense to not because there's a lot of lap time you leave on the table. But on the other side, you need to be very open-minded. It's more about getting on top of why do we have a car that, on Friday, is by far the quickest before the Colapinto situation. Hamilton was 4/10 up, and the last sector was just trouble, but he would have been quickest. And then on Saturday, it's transformed. In the sprint race, we had a broken suspension, that's one explanation. We fixed that in qualifying and nothing would go anymore, we struggled with pace. Today, an incident in that corner that came out of nowhere, he was not pushing at all. Although Sergio Perez has denied he will announce his retirement in Mexico, Helmut Marko says he needs to improve after Liam Lawson emerged as a man for the future in Austin. Lawson could not have asked for a better audition than the one he put in at the United States Grand Prix, as he walked away with 2 World Championship points. Replacing Daniel Ricciardo at V-Carb for the final 6 races of the season, Lawson is auditioning for a spot on the F1 2025 grid. The big question is, will it be with V-Carb, or will he replace Perez at Red Bull? Lawson, contesting a Grand Prix for the first time in over 12 months, shrugged off any sign of cobwebs to show his 1-lap pace in qualifying as he went 3rd fastest in Q1, the only session in which he put his foot down given his pending 60-place grid penalty. He was 3/10 up on Perez. You showed what you had to show, his race engineer told him after the session. Lawson replied, "That's all I wanted to do." Lining up 19th on the circuit of the Americas grid, Lawson made up positions off the line and ran a long first stint to undercut his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. While Tsunoda's frustrations boiled over into a spin, Lawson raced his way to 9th place. Red Bull Motorsport advisor Marko was full of praise for the Kiwi. "A really great debut," Marko told Sky Deutschland. That was already apparent in Q1 where he drove the 3rd fastest time. He was in control at all times and had great overtaking maneuvers. You have to put the youngsters in the car and then it works. He is definitely a man for the future. Red Bull team boss Christian Horner was also impressed, saying, "I thought he jumped in and looked like a veteran. He did great and he can be very happy with that drive. I thought he drove a great Grand Prix, starting 19th, finishing in the points, some great overtakes, so he should be pleased with that." The same cannot be said for either Marko or Horner's assessment of Perez's Sunday. Although he lined up 9th on the grid, 10 positions ahead of Lawson, he only made up 3 during the Grand Prix to finish P6, where he was 10 seconds up the road from the Kiwi. Marko was asked about the rumor that Perez could announce his retirement at the next race in Mexico. "It's a rumor," said the 81-year-old. "He himself says there is no truth in it." And then he added, "Let's see, but he has to improve his performance." Horner too concedes Red Bull need more from Perez, especially as they're up against McLaren and Ferrari, who both have 2 drivers bringing in big points. Ferrari, congratulations to them this weekend. They've been very, very strong, he told the media. They've got 2 drivers that are competing at the front. McLaren likewise, their drivers, there's not a big deficit between them. So that's where we really need for the constructors to have CHECO come into play. Hopefully, with the support he will receive in Mexico, it will give him that boost. Obviously, when you qualify out of position, you lose so much time coming through tail-end cars in the top 10 that you've then lost contact with the rest of the race. Although Red Bull outscored McLaren for the first time since Spain and Austin, Ferrari were the big winners in the Constructors' Championship with their 1-2 result, as they're just 8 points behind Red Bull in the standings and 48 behind McLaren. That's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.